All right. Good to see everybody. We are live on TikTok and we are live on YouTube. YouTube looks horrible. Suppose that looks a little bit better. TikTok looks good. All right. This will be a short live. I know our last live was like 3 hours or so, but this is going to be a short live, just getting into the new Kenyan Digital Nomad Permit. It is not a visa. All right. I hear a lot of people saying that. For me, that's a red flag. It's an indication that that person doesn't actually know what they're doing. Visas grant you access into a country. Permits permit you to stay there. So the visa that you would use to enter the country would be either a single entry or a multi-entry visa. And in Kenya, we've even gotten away from visas where we use electronic travel authorizations, right? So permits are beyond visas. Visas just get you into the country. Permits handle the rest. All right. So this is not a visa. This is a permit. All right. The new digital nomad permit is pretty cool in the sense that our firm has been doing immigration into Kenya for quite a while now. And there are qualifying events that sometimes box certain groups of people out. Right. And I get it. And I agree with it the way that Kenya does it. However, it has excluded quite a few people that maybe could have benefited from being able to immigrate and do their thing out here. So the digital nomad visa kind of corrects all of that, right? For a residency visa, you used to have you still have a minimum age of 35 years old, and you got to make $2,000 a month, okay? So if you're 30 years old and you make $5,000 a month, you would not qualify for a residency permit, all right? Beyond that, what people used to have to then get into if they were too young for a residency permit would be an investor's permit. And to get into an investor's permit, you didn't have the age requirement, right? So you could be any age over the age of 18, but they weren't playing around with people who claimed to be investors or people who were all talk and no action. So the way that they went ahead and quantified that was you would have to be able to deposit $100,000 in a local bank account. You didn't pay it to anybody, but you would have to show that you actually had the funds to be a legitimate investor, right? So that boxed a lot of people out, especially people who are younger than 35, right? So the only other ways in there are a bunch of other permits, but most of those are niche permits. So the one that was used the most would be you found some kind of nonprofit to volunteer for, and then there was like a volunteer permit that they could apply for you, or you tried to get hired by a legitimate company somewhere in the country, and then that company would have to think that you were valuable enough to go ahead and pay all the money to do a work permit, right? And then there were the scams in there that got people like all caught up, right? Like people trying to tell you, oh, you can open your own company and then sponsor yourself for your own work permit. That don't even sound right. But the amount of people that get caught up in that scam, it's ridiculous, right? Then they run to our law firm, when all their money is gone and want us to recover their funds for them. So what ends up happening is this new permit kind of bridges that gap where the age restriction is gone and the income restriction is gone. Initially, it had a ridiculous income restriction. We told the government to take another look at that. LSK and all the groups that were stakeholders were like, hey, listen, you really need to take another look at that, because the numbers that they were dealing with initially were even higher than like European numbers, right? So they took a look at that, made sense of it, got rid of that requirement, which was the only requirement that was still really kind of holding it back. So now it brought that permit kind of up the code where it's competitive with the rest of the world, and we actually have a pretty decent permit here. Now, it's still a digital nomad permit, so there is no direct path to citizenship. So that's one of the cons, right? If you got a residency permit, there's a direct path to citizenship. If you have a dependent pass, which is also a permit, that's a direct path to citizenship, right? But if you have a digital nomad or an investor permit, those are not direct paths to citizenship. So that's a con on the digital nomad side. One of the pros is the cost. It's comparatively cost effective, right? So for an example, if you do a residency permit, by the time you've paid everything, the legal fees, the application fees, and the biggest chunk, the issuance fees, right? If you have a max residency permit, which is a 3-year permit, the issuance fee is $250,000 Kenyan shillings per year. So just the issuance fees alone are like $6,200, depending on what the Forex is that day, right? So that doesn't count the legal fees. That doesn't count the application fee. That doesn't count all the other fees that you got to pay. Just the issuance fee is over $6,000, right? Now, with the new digital nomad permit, to get a max digital nomad permit, the entire thing, including your legal fees and all that, is going to be $5,500. So getting the entire max permit for the digital nomad is less than what you would pay for the just the issuance fee of the residency permit. So that's a pro for the digital nomad permit. One of the other pros is you can maintain a business and you can work in that business actively as long as the business is not doing business with Kenyan clients or doing business in Kenya. Now, one of the things with that is understanding what the legal definitions of those terms are. One of the reasons why Kenya is so awesome for Americans in particular is because the definitions of doing work legally are opposite and beneficial to that American who's living here, right? So you can be doing something here that the IRS in America considers work, right? And then if you're over here, there's an IRS form called IRS Form 2555. And when you file that form, if you qualify, you get $130,000 foreign earned income credit, right? So if you're working in a foreign country, $130,000 is wiped out. It's a credit, right? So that first $130,000, you don't have to pay any taxes on. And the definition of work from the United States side would apply to anything that you are doing here. But on the Kenyan side, the definition of work is different. So you could have a situation where you don't work in Kenya, which would be a violation of a digital nomad permit, right? You don't work in Kenya from the Kenyan side of things, so you qualify for the permit. But from the American side of things, you are working in Kenya, which means that you can write off $130,000 in taxes, right? So you want to make sure that as you pick countries to go to, hey, Miriam, all right, you pick the right country and you make sure that all of those legal definitions and those tax definitions line up for your benefit, all right? Super important. It's part of your due diligence. Hey, Isaac, how's it going? So that's your pros and your cons there. That's first level of pros and cons there. Now, if you wanted to physically own a company and physically do business here, you're not going to be able to do that on a digital nomad permit. Now you have to look at actually going back and getting an investor's permit, right? That investor's permit allows you to operate your own business here on the ground, do business with Kenyans, so on and so forth. But like I said, in order to do that, you have to be able to put up $100,000 in a local bank account, right? So if you don't have the $100,000 to put up in the local bank account, then you might want to think on about holding off on doing business here specifically and going ahead and remotely doing business from wherever it is you're coming from so that you can qualify for the nomad permit by doing business with non-Kenyans and remotely from Kenya. That's the whole point of the digital nomad permit, right? So that's the nuance between, okay, you still owning a business. What's the difference between the actual business permit, which would be your investor permit, and the digital nomad permit? The digital nomad is doing business with people other than Kenyans for a company that is not in Kenya, right? So other than Kenyans for a company that is not in Kenya, that might qualify under digital nomad. If you're doing a physical business in Kenya and your clients are going to be Kenyans, you need an investor's permit, right? Digital nomad permit has no working papers. That's another con, right? Residency permit also has no working papers. Okay. Your investor permit comes with working papers. Your NGO permit comes with working papers to a certain extent. You can volunteer for the NGO. And then your work permit, of course, obviously comes with work papers. Work permits have to be initiated by a Kenyan company, right? So work permit is not something that you apply for. It's something that a company applies for on your behalf. So that's essentially a non-starter. There's nothing you can do other than apply for a job as far as a work permit is concerned. But you can apply for a investor's permit as long as you have the money, right? And you can apply for a digital nomad permit, and you can apply for a residency permit. It just depends on what your focus is. For all of our clients who their focus is dual citizenship, they want a second passport. They want that passport to be from Kenya. The only real option for them is residency as far as them controlling the option. The second option is marriage, but then they don't control that option, because if the marriage gets called off, you just lose all those years, right? So it takes 7 years no matter what you're doing. So it's either 7 years as a resident or 7 years of marriage, right? And if on year 6 your spouse, files for divorce, you're done. And you lost all 6 of those years. Even if you go get a residency permit, you now need 7 years as a resident. So that's the path where you don't have any control, right? The residency permit path is the path where you do have control. So we actually have a lot of clients who are married, and instead of going through their spouses, since it takes exactly the same amount of time, they actually get their own residency permit almost as a safety net. In case anything goes wrong, they can still get their dual citizenship on time because it's not dependent on that other person, right? So residency permit and dependent pass are the only 2 direct paths to citizenship as far as Kenya is concerned. We've had people who our firm has gotten them their investor permit, and they've been here, all 7 years, and they applied for citizenship and they were denied, right? Very, very rarely does anyone who is not on a residency permit path get dual citizenship. It's possible. You can apply for it. You can try to fight for it, but typically you're going to get denied your first 3 times, right? You're not getting a refund, right? So it becomes an expensive proposition if you don't do it the right way. Everything becomes expensive if you don't do it the right way, right? It doesn't matter what country it is. If you don't do it the right way, or you try to wing it, or you try to figure it out on your own, it becomes ridiculous, right? So those are your pros and your cons as far as trying to get your dual citizenship. Then the digital nomad permit is definitely a con for you. And even on the other side of that, the investor permit is still a con, right? And most of the other permits as well. If you're looking for dual citizenship, you need to focus on a residency permit, right? Which is not necessarily what we're talking about today. But from the pros and cons side of things, if you're looking for dual citizenship, then you don't want to use a nomad permit. Now, a residency permit requires you to be 35. Right. So if you're not 35 and you want to build your life out here in preparation for a dual citizenship, then it might make sense to go ahead and do the digital nomad permit just to be here legally and to be able to kind of create a life for yourself legally while you wait on time. Right now, then that age restriction does not attach itself for married couples. So if you're going through it the marriage way and you're going through it with a dependent pass, then you're not going to necessarily have to worry about being 35. So that's how that works. Now, for our firm personally, the way that we've been handling the digital nomad permits is we have 3 tiers of service. We normally always have 3 tiers of service for whatever we do. So we have an access tier. Access is essentially we just get you the permit, right? So if we're doing the access tier, there's a couple things that you need requirement rise to get the digital nomad permit. One of them is you need a lease or you need, a home, right? So if you're going to be a digital nomad here, you're going to be living here, you're going to be working here, you have to kind of show like where it is that you're going to be working. And that's almost another financial hurdle for you to jump, just to show that you have the finances to kind of do it, right? Because typically the landlord that you're dealing with is not going to give you the lease unless you've paid. And like in many African countries, typically people pay in chunks. So they don't pay like a security deposit in the first month and then month to month to month to month. Typically people pay every 6 months or every year out here. So it shows the government like, all right, they done paid for 6 months, at this apartment block, or they bought a house, right? And they're going to be operating out of their house and so on and so forth. So for the nomad access, our lawyers will go ahead and do lease drafting for you and lease negotiation, because the laws aren't the same, right? No matter where you're from, the laws are going to be different and the rental laws are going to be different. So if you don't have a really solid lease in place, depending on where you chose to live, you might run into a problem. What kind of problem might you run into? So for example, I live in a place called Diani Beach. Diani Beach is a huge tourist area, right? And so there's a hot season and a low season. Right now it's the low season. So right now you might be able to get into a place and you might be able to sign a year lease and get a really good price. Okay, fine. But when the hot season comes and everybody's coming on vacation and all the prices double and triple, that landlord might get it in his head that it's worth it for him to kick you out and then make as much as you paid for the entire year in 2-3 months, right? So if you don't have a solid lease in place, that might happen to you, right? Because this is not America. You don't have to go through eviction proceedings in that way. But with the leases that our law firm puts in place, there's a penalty that they would have to pay for that. So then it makes it like it's not worth it for them to do that. They might have to pay you, if you paid a month, in advance, if they don't give you 3 months notice, maybe they got to pay a 9-month penalty, right? So if you've already lived there for 6-7 months and now comes the tourist season, they would actually have to pay you more than you paid them the entire time you've been living there to kick you out and bring somebody in and then hopefully recoup all that money. And obviously when you get that lump sum of money, it ain't a big deal. You can just get another place. Typically though, our standard business, we build houses for people so they don't have to deal with anything like that. But because the nomad permit is so much cheaper than the other permits, right? Like a residency permit's like, $10,000 minimum, right? Somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000 when it's all said and done. Your nomad permit, it's going to be $5,500 when it's all said and done, right? So even less than half of what the other permit costs. So because of that, it does attract a different class of person, and so those people might be renting, especially if they're true nomads and they're going to like leave and come and leave and come. Then they might actually be looking to rent. So our lawyers will take care of that, make sure you don't get screwed over down the road in the renting process and all that. Of course, we do all the immigration stuff. We do all the tax stuff, even though you are tax exempt. You're tax exempt for quite a while. And then each time you renew, the tax exemption renews. So you're essentially just tax exempt. You don't have working papers, so you should just be tax exempt, period. If you do something you're not supposed to do, then they expect you to pay taxes on it. And that just might affect you in a renewal, right? So when you renew, they might be like, you violated your permit because you worked here and you didn't have working papers. We're not renewing your, whatever. But you do want those tax numbers in play and that tax account set up, because it's not just about paying income tax, right? So like, for example, I got a bunch of like Ninja stuff, right? So like I got like a Ninja espresso machine, and there's a Ninja ice cream maker or whatever, and a Ninja waffle maker and all of that stuff. There's no Ninja store in Kenya, so all my Ninja stuff was imported through Amazon, right? So when I import something, I have to use my tax pin, right, to do the VAT payment and the and the tariffs essentially, right? And so what ends up happening though is I actually get like a tax refund because the difference between what you pay in VAT to bring it in and then what the true value ends up being because it's like an estimated value when they estimate the VAT. So at the end of the year, there's actually what they get like a VAT payback, right? So all the stuff that you brought in, it's on your tax account, and then at the end of the year, you can do your taxes, and they can be like, all right, you overpaid VAT by this amount, so we're going to give you that money back, and you can actually get a tax refund, even though you're not paying any income tax, right? So it's important that you have those numbers so that you can bring things into the country and stuff like that. When we get you the permit, we can get you a tariff waiver to move like your household stuff into Kenya. It essentially comes with the permit. It's not automatic. Our lawyers have to do a bunch of extra stuff to get it for you, but it activates once you get the permit. And there's a certain amount of days, like 90 days from the time you get the permit to the time that you have to get that, or else it's gone forever. But you can bring in one container with all of your stuff, right? So if you're like moving your household, you can even bring a car. And typically it has to be the stuff you already own. It's not supposed to be new stuff, but Americans, because we drive on the other side of the road and our steering wheel is on the other side of the car in America, that's the one reason where you get a waiver where you can bring in a new car if you want and not have to pay the duty because you couldn't bring your old car because it's not like road legal here, right? So Americans get to bring in, and other people who drive on that side of the street, but people who don't drive on the same side of the street as they do here get to bring in a new car versus like our UK clients, they got to bring their car because they drive on the same side of the street in the UK. So that's another kind of plus if you're, an American. We also help with the bank account setup, which is a tough thing to do until you get a permit out here. Hey, Black Pilot, good to see you, man. Tough thing to do out here to get a bank account until you have a permit, right? Tourists do not need bank accounts. This is probably the #1 country in the world for digital currency, right? It's essentially a cashless country. So you can pay for everything as a tourist just on your cell phone. You do not need a bank account as a tourist. So on any kind of visa that you use to get here or ETA that you use to get here, that's not enough to open up a bank account for you. You need to have a permit. So we can get all of that stuff set up, and then all of that cashless digital currency stuff that I was just talking about, we set that up as well. So it's a very basic, all your basic stuff is taken care of, and that's at that $5,500 tier. So that's the basic bottom tier. The next tier up is what we call the Nomad Ultra. For the Nomad Ultra, you're going to get everything that you got in Nomad Access, but then you also get the 1 year of rent prepaid, right? In certain, select places right now, because the Nomad thing is brand new. So we don't have places all over the place, but you can live at the beach. You get 1 year at the beach. Your rent is taken care of. Your internet's taken care of. We take care of maid services and all of that as well. We'll set up your local cell phone and your starter pack on that. You'll have a grocery delivery person, so like a dedicated delivery person that actually delivers anything, not just groceries. But you would call them, tell them to go get you whatever, and they would either, again, this is like one of the most integrated places in digital currency. So sometimes a delivery person will literally call you from the grocery store and be like, hey, I'm at the cash register. The total for what you ordered is this. The grocery store is about to send a code to your cell phone so you can pay for it, and then I'm going to deliver it to you, right? And that's a very normal thing here. You get to the grocery store and they're like, yeah, what's your number? They type your number in the register and you get a little notification. The grocery store would like to charge you X amount of dollars, put your PIN in. And you put your PIN in on your cell phone and boom, the grocery store is paid. Your receipt comes out, you're out, right? So you can send people to pick up stuff for you, and then they can just call you like, hey, I just want to make sure like you're looking at your phone so you see this message. I'm at the register. Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, cool. Click. And a second later, beep, beep. Such and such a grocery store wants to charge you X, Y, and Z. Yes, put in your PIN, paid, done. And then that person actually delivers your groceries or whatever else it is you're looking for to your house. So that service is made available to you as well. And then there's a full concierge like onboarding situation with that. So in order to do that side, that runs anywhere between 25,000 and 35,000, and it depends on where you want to live, right? But that's everything. That's your rent included, your utilities, your internet, your all of that stuff, your maid services. Everything is just kind of covered. Your basic kind of coverage for 1 year. Right. And then when we renew the next year, you can either keep going with that or, roll the dice and see if you can do better. You won't be able to because obviously we have deals, but you can roll the dice and see if you can do better on your own and whatever. And then come back if you need to come back. Now, we always have a luxury tier, and our luxury tier is not so much a floss tier, right? Hey, Juicy, how are you? Not so much a floss tier. It's more of people who are seriously business minded, seriously generationally wealth minded. We always have a tier for you guys. So there is the Nomad Legacy tier, right? So Nomad Legacy gives you everything the other tiers gave you, except with the Nomad Legacy, you're going to get your own land in your name. You're going to sit down with our architects and you're going to design a house, right? And we have a couple templates, but you can fiddle around with the inside of it, right? And so you're going to design that house. We're going to custom build it and make sure that it's like Airbnb ready. We're going to set up a trust fund for you, offshore trust, to help get you started on your generational wealth, right? And then what ends up happening is you're there doing your digital nomad stuff, right? No, nomad. Digital is a digital nomad permit. So you're there doing your digital nomad stuff. So you're working. So it's a really beautiful house with an office and all of that stuff. So you're doing whatever you're doing while you're there. But when you leave, you now have an Airbnb in country that's working for you, turnkey, and hopefully popping out some really good ROI to you, right? So the next place you go, like if you're a true digital nomad and you're really nomadic and you're bouncing from place to place, then the next place you go, you're essentially richer because you now have this permanent property that's 100% yours that's pumping out revenue to you. So we just had somebody go to Bali and they did the legacy package. So they have their Airbnb paying them. They were already getting paid from their remote job. Now they're in Bali. They're going to be there for 3 months, and their Airbnb is going to be paying them the entire time that they're there, right? And for them, it's been so good that they're going to be in Bali for 3 months. I think they're going to either Mexico or Colombia for a couple months, and then they're coming back and buying another one, right? They already got the house, but they want to keep making money off of that house. So they're coming back and they're buying another one. So they're going to have 2 Airbnbs here, right? So the Nomad Legacy tier it starts at 170. Typically, people just stay at 170. I know when you normally hear starts at, that means it's a bunch more. It's not a bunch more. It's just that if you want a bigger house, then obviously it costs more. Most people, they pick from the houses that we already have set up that are already in that 170 price range. So no one actually has gone above the 170 for the digital nomads, right? We have trust estate packages, which I'm not really going to dive too deep into because this is supposed to be a digital nomad life. But on that side is where people go big, right? So people will do 20-bedroom family estates for their trust fund, estate and all of that stuff. Most of the digital nomads, though, they just, keep it simple with the standard floor plan. There's 2 or 3 standard floor plans. There's one floor plan that's like a bachelor plan. So it's a 2-story house. On the downstairs, you have a living room. And then around the corner, you have like a dining room that goes into a kitchen. And then there's an office there. And that office and the living room are kind of in the same parallel of the house. And the front door is in front of the living room. So the office also has a door, which means that if you need to invite somebody to your office to have like a meeting with them, they don't have to go in your house, and the office has its own bathroom, right? So there's an office with its own entrance, so that if you got somebody coming over to talk business, they can come in the office and not enter your home. And then there's another door that's your actual front door into your home, and that leads into your living room. And then you turn the corner, and there's your dining room and your kitchen, right? And then there's an office. In between the office and the living room are your stairs to the second floor. You go up to the second floor, there's a master bedroom, en suite, which means there's a bathroom in the master bedroom. And then there's a walk-in master bath. So the bath is gigantic. The bath is actually almost the exact same size as the bedroom. It's huge. So you like walk in, there's a giant glass wall. You open the door, there's a bathtub in the shower area. There's a shower. There's a bench that has jacuzzi jets that shoot out against your back and like massage your back. Like, it's incredible bathroom. And then there's a library up there, and then that's it, right? So it's a massive 1-bedroom with an office, and that's that. The other design is for people who are bringing their kids, because one of the other pros of the digital nomad permit is you can bring your whole family on it if you want, right? You got to buy a pass for each one of the family members, but you don't have to get a permit. So it's like $1,500 extra, not $5,500 extra, right? And so you can bring everybody. So there are a lot of single moms that are digital nomads, and they travel with their kid, and they typically homeschool their kid, right? It's like a whole demographic. So there's another design where that bathroom, that giant walk-in sauna bathroom thing from the bachelor house, instead of it being a 1-bedroom, it's now a 2-bedroom. So you just have a regular old bathroom, like you walk in, there's a shower, no bathtub, there's a toilet and a bidet and a vanity, standard bathroom in your bedroom. And then the size of that shower that I said was the same size as a bedroom, now it actually is a bedroom, right? With its own bathroom as well. So on the second floor, there's a kid's bedroom, there's mom's bedroom or dad's bedroom and the kid's bedroom, and then downstairs is exactly the same. You still have your office. The only difference is when you have the kid version, there's a section that's kind of next to the stairs that can be turned into like a mini office. And typically what happens with that kid design is that mini office actually becomes the homeschool office. So the kids have like a place to go do their homework and all of that stuff, right? So those are the two standard designs that our architect already has, made, and typically people choose between them. So it's either like a killer 1-bedroom Airbnb that has this like really cool Instagrammable like shower and all these features, or it's a really solid 2-bedroom, 2-story house. They're both 2 stories, and you get 1/8 of an acre near the beach on the coast with that package. So that package, again, is for people who are really kind of thinking ahead, really kind of thinking of their legacy. And they're like, okay, I'm going to go live in Kenya for a year, 2 years. 2 years is the max on the permit before you have to renew it. And then when I'm done, this house is going to start kicking me out Airbnb income, so that while I'm gone, I'm making money on it. And when I'm there, I have a place to live. Like I said, some people like this last client, Caitlin's her name. When she comes back, she's actually buying another one. So she's going to drop another 170 and get a second Airbnb instead of going back to her house and taking her Airbnb off. And that's just because hers has been that profitable, right? So she's been getting, I believe it's like 390 a night is where hers is at. She's been getting that 390 a night because she was smart enough to like really, really hook up the landscaping. So her place is dope because like the backyard has the recessed seating and the pool and the fireplace and the pizza oven and all of that stuff, right? So the house is decent, but what you do with the outside, because you got a lot of property, right? The floor plan, it's 2-story and it doesn't take up a lot of place. You can actually put 2 of these houses on one 50 by 100, right? So you have a lot of space around your house. And you can do some really, really cool landscaping. So she's doing Airbnb. No, she's just a digital nomad, but she figures like as she moves around, she might as well increase her net worth. So instead of just coming here and essentially spending money for a year or two just to like kind of be a digital nomad, she's increasing her real estate footprint everywhere she goes. So we have a partner that can do it in the Dominican Republic and Mexico as well. And so she's going to have a place in Mexico. She already has a place here in Kenya with us. And the ROI that she's been getting in Kenya has been good enough that she's getting another one in Kenya before she even gets one in Mexico. But she has friends that do Mexico. So yeah. Love more info. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can DM me. All right. So that's the digital nomad permit. So the 3 permits that most people have to choose from is the brand new digital nomad permit that we're talking about today, right? The pros are it's cheaper, and you can still work, but you just can't work technically in Kenya. So you can do remote work, but you can't work for a Kenyan company, and you can't serve Kenyan clients, right? The cons are you don't have a work permit, so you can't, work in Kenya serving Kenyan clients. I have some clients interested. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we as far as that, I might as well just touch on that. Our standard referral fee is 6%. And so I just said that like the Nomad legacy is 170. So you get 6% of 170. On our trust side, our full-on trust fund estates, offshore trust estates are 250. We just put up 2 of those. So if you keep watching this channel, you'll see like the aerial, photography of all of that. And that'll be done in like 3 months. So you'll get to see what it looks like when it's done, right? So the people who referred those trust estates, they got $13,500 cash as their referral fee, and they didn't have to do any selling. They just had to refer, and then the person had to close, right? So our referral program is really, really good. We've put a couple people through college. Used to have this guy named Vin, man. He graduated from dentistry school, and he doesn't do it anymore. But while he was in school, it's what he did for money. And I mean, he made like 160 grand a year just referring people to us. He was so good. But he makes way more money now, being a maxillofacial surgeon, I think it was. So yeah, he's doing pretty well. But anyway, our referral program is pretty solid. There's a lot of people who live off of it. The average person does about 4 a year. So that's about $60,000 a year as a 1099. So how you handle the taxes is on you. All of that stuff is on you. So yeah, if you have some clients that are interested, you'll definitely be paid for it. So back to how the permits work. So on the digital nomad, that's what it is. You can still work. You can come here as a representative of your foreign company, which is really cool as far as qualifying is concerned. And there's no age limit. Residency permit is the only straightforward way to get dual citizenship, right? So the residency permit is a direct path to dual citizenship, right? But it costs more. Your basic nomad permit is $5,500. It's like nothing in the permit world, right? Your basic residency permit is going to be about $10,000, right? So it's more. It's almost double, right? And it can go as high as like 12,000 if there are other legal steps we have to take with you. Like if you have a criminal record, well, now we got to go to court and like make sure that the judge allows you to immigrate and all of that stuff, right? So that makes it more. So then now you're looking at 12,000, right? So the permit's definitely more. Still no work permit attached to it, right? So you're still not supposed to work here. And you have to be 35 years or older, and you have to show that you make $2,000 a month, or more, which if you're trying to live in another country, you should probably be at that level. if not better. That permit, a lot of people try to refer to it as a retirement permit. There's no such thing as a retirement permit with an age restriction of 35, right? The reason why they call it a retirement permit is because people who are retired who have a pension typically make more than that $2,000 a month, and they're obviously over the age of 35. So it's like easy mode. So people will say it's a retirement permit just so that all of the clients or the prospects that come through probably qualify, right? But that's not true. You can be 36 years old and you make 2,000 a month, and you could qualify for that permit. The most expensive permit, even though it technically costs the same thing as a residency permit, is the investor permit. And what makes it more expensive is they don't play around with people who just say they have a business. If you want to come in and open up a business and run a business, you need an investor's permit. And in order to prove that you actually are what you say you are, you need to put $100,000 in a local bank account. You don't pay it to anybody. It's still your $100,000. You just have to show the government that you're about this life and that you are a real business person and that you got it, right? So that's what makes it the most expensive, is that you have to have that liquid. And especially for like Americans that deal with credit-based business systems, they might have $1 million net worth and only got $50,000 in the bank at any given time because their money's out working for them, right? We don't like having money sitting around and it's losing money because of inflation. We like putting that money to work because we have a credit-based system. So even people who have a legitimate $1 million net worth sometimes run into problems getting that $100,000 together. So that's what makes it the most expensive. We've had plenty of clients that actually borrowed it, so like the very last investor permit that we put together, I think they had like 25,000 in their own savings or whatever. And then husband went to his family, wife went to her family. They got the money together. We went through the process. They got the permit, gave the wife's family back her money. Husband gave the husband's family back their money. Everybody's happy with everybody, right? So, that happens as well. But that's what makes that permit kind of the most expensive. There is no age limit on it though, right? Because the monetary limit is enough to make sure that the person who's coming in is qualified. So those are your 3 standard permits. The 4th permit is a work permit. Work permits have to be filed by a local company. You have to be sponsored to have a work permit, right? One of the biggest cons that you'll see out here is people trying to tell you that they can set up a company for you. You pay to have the company set up, and then your own company will sponsor you for a work permit. First of all, that's more expensive. Second of all, it's stupid, because if you get an investor permit, the investor permit gives you tax benefits. If you have a work permit, you're an employee. You don't get any tax benefits. So now you just spent more money. It's a fraudulent conveyance. So as soon as the government catches you, you're going to be deported and banned permanently. And in the time that you were operating your business, you lost out on all your tax incentives. And that's typically when you get caught. Typically the year after you go through with the scam nonsense, the IRS, the local version of the IRS, which is called KRA, comes knocking on your door. And then when they do their investigation, they realize that you're completely fraudulent. And you get deported and all your assets get seized and blah, 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 blah. So do things the right way the first time and you'll be fine, right? So it's 7 years to dual citizenship. The 2 ways to get dual citizenship is, number 1, the direct way, residency permit for 7 years straight, apply for dual citizenship. Our law firm does it all the time. The second way, which is indirect because you're not in control over whether you qualify or not, is through marriage. And so if your partner, decides not to file for your permit 1 year, or your partner decides it's time for a divorce, thanks for the gift, Chief. Whatever the reason might be, that gap in you holding that dependency permit is going to upset your bid for dual citizenship. So when you apply for dual citizenship and they do the very stringent background check that they do, they're going to see that you missed a renewal, and that's going to reset your time, and you're not going to be eligible for that pass. You're going to have to, from whatever time the renewal that you missed, you're going to have to restart your 7 years from there. If you do the residency permit, you're in control, right? Because you're going to renew your permit, on time, and our law firm is obviously going to remind you. So then you put yourself in a position where it's like, all right, you're definitely going to qualify in the quickest time possible because you're in control of it. So we have a lot of people who are married and they still just do residency permits. So that way, if anything goes wrong in their marriage or anything crazy happens, or even if just the spouse forgets, because when you do the marriage one, the spouse is in charge of registering the dependent pass on their immigration account, right? So if they forget to register it, and it slips their mind, they don't tell you, they just screwed up your dual citizenship. So if you want control over the process and you want to make sure that you get the process done in the fastest amount of time possible, then you're going to use a residency permit. So that's the pros and the cons of all the permits and kind of the side-by-side comparison of all the permits. The digital nomad is the heaviest one on paperwork. We got to do a couple extra things with the digital nomad permit that we don't have to do with any other permits. One of them is we have to get an embassy no contest letter, right? So our lawyers handle that. No matter what embassy you come from, we have connections with all the embassies that we've been building over the last 6 months, which is as long as this thing has been out. And the first 3 were just issued about 3 weeks ago. And so it was firms like ours that were instrumental in like testing this thing and figuring out how it was going to work, that were able to, process those first 3 permits. So that's an extra piece of paperwork that people typically don't have to come up. Like you typically don't need permission from your government to immigrate to another government, but because this is nomad, they're not seeing it as it's like a non-immigrant permit, right? They're not seeing it as a permanent immigration. So, and they also want to make sure that you're not like a government employee who's not allowed to work, even if you are, working remotely for the government, you might not be allowed to work in a foreign country as a government contractor, right? Maybe the government's concerned that the data going, from your computer to the DoD can be intercepted if you're not in the United States or whatever, right? So you actually need a letter from the embassy that says that they don't contest it. So that's an extra requirement. Beyond that, you need a letter from your employer if it's an employer situation. Remember, you can represent your own company or any other company as a shareholder, right? And if it's an LLC, you would be a member. That's the equivalent of a shareholder in an LLC in the United States. So you can do that with the digital nomad permit. So if that's the case, you still need the letter, but you're writing the letter for yourself essentially at that point. If you do work for a company and you have, remote work access and you're allowed to do it from another country, because some companies are like weird about that, then you need the letter from them. And so that's essentially it as far as the additional, and you need the lease. That's also additional. You don't need leases for any of these other permits, but for the digital nomad permit, you do need a lease. So if you're doing ultra with us, then we're going to write you the lease because we're going to set up, where you're living. If you're doing legacy, then you can write yourself the lease because you're building a house, or we can write one for you because you're building a house, and so it's your place. You don't have to do a lease at that point. And if you're doing nomad access, though, then that's bare bones, like just the permit. And so, everything else is kind of on you. Even in that bare bones access, though, we will go ahead and get your embassy paperwork because it might be hard for you to get it. And we will do negotiations and drafting of the lease for you so that you don't get screwed over in the lease. We'll still help you with coordination for a bank account. We'll still help you deal with M-Pesa and get that set up. We'll still help you with KRA PIN registration. So we'll still do a lot of kind of additional beyond just the permit work for you, even at the basic level, just to make sure you really have everything you need. We'll also do your biometrics and get you like your ID card, which opens up a whole different, world of access for you. And we'll explain that in another live, but we'll get you where you're good, you know what I mean? But you're on your own. as far as the basic is concerned. And that's really, really good for like people who are like, yeah, I'm just going to be here for 3 months. Like I'm a digital nomad. I'm going to be there for 3 months and then I'm leaving. Maybe I'll come back, maybe I won't. You know what I mean? If that's the case, that's a really good tier for you. If you're going to be here for the full 2 years that you're going to get on that nomad permit, then Ultra might make more sense, because then you'll be able to have a place, at the beach or even in Nairobi if that's where you want to be. And it's like all paid and you don't have to worry about anything, for that first year at least. So that's where Ultra makes some sense. And again, like if you're really business minded and you're really like generational wealth minded and legacy minded, then your Nomad Legacy is going to make the most sense, where you come in and we build you a custom house and that becomes an Airbnb when you leave and go either back home or go to the next place that you're going to, nomad to. And then, you got that income coming in forever. And then we put that in an offshore trust. And we also create an offshore company as well that's owned by the trust, to make sure that all of that stuff is secure and safe. And also there's some tax reasons for that as well. So that is how the Digital Nomad Permit works. Those are the tiers of service that our firm, the Diaspora Freedom Initiative, has available for you. If you want to talk to us about any of that, the link is in the bio. You can do a free call. There's a free discovery call that we do, but we do not talk solutions in discovery calls. Discovery call is simply to make sure that we can actually do something for you. And, and if we can't, we are not shy about saying, nope, we can't help you. We're not the right firm for you. And if we do know who the right firm for you is, we'll absolutely refer you to the right firm. That's not a problem with us at all. If we can help you, then you would move into a paid consultation. It's a little bit different with law firms or with firms that have a full legal team doing most of the work. And so there has to be that like attorney client connection there. So we don't really do the free consultations up front. It also keeps riffraff. I'm just going to keep it 100 with you guys. It also keeps riffraff out of our hair. There's a lot of people that when you do a free consultations, we used to do them. They'll show up and they just want to pick your brain. They just want to intellectually masturbate, but they don't want to do anything beyond that. And there was actually a point in time where our calendar was so full of those people that like legitimate clients that wanted to do business couldn't even book dates with us. So once we switched to paid consultations and we brought on the legal team, back then we didn't have a legal team. So that was a little bit different as well. But once we switched to paid consultations, what we do is we credit them to your service agreement. So they're still free, but the people who just want to waste your time, they won't even pay for something that they get back on the back end, right? So it gets all those people kind of out of your hair. So that way you guys can actually access us when you need to access us. And then we've gotten into a lot of like concierge, like 24/7 type of stuff, which would not be possible if our staff was bogged down with a bunch of people that just want to talk for free. So it allows us to be able to give you guys who are at that tier level, that 24/7 concierge service. For those folks that are on that tier level, it works out really, really well for them. They can call us at 3 a.m. and somebody will answer the phone and they get their own private number and blah, 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 blah. We take care of everything for them. So that's obviously at our top tiers. But that's available because we're very mindful of not wasting our time or yours. So we have no problem telling people like, hey, we're not the right fit for you. We can't help you. And then we'll try to refer you to somebody who can. You can also go to your embassy in the country that you want to come to. So if we're talking Kenya, you can go to your embassy in Nairobi and you can ask your embassy for their like legal service provider list, right? And they should be able to give you a list of people who can help you out. So you definitely do not have to work with us. If you're not feeling us, if it's not a vibe, we're 100% cool with that. We stick with our people for 7 years if they want dual citizenship. So it's like a relationship, right? And so we definitely have to make sure that you're a person that we can work with, because this is 7 years. It's 7 years from the time you start to the time that you're eligible that our lawyers are filing for your dual citizenship requires 7 years of having the permit. So typically people are with us for 8 years, right? Because they get with us and it's like 6 weeks until we get them the permit. Hold on for you TikTokers. It looks like I'm getting a challenge. It's a weird thing with TikTok. I don't know why TikTok does that. It makes me answer a challenge to keep the live going. But anyway, so typically it takes like 6 weeks to get the permit. Now you have the permit, but maybe we've been talking for 3 months before, you onboarded and paid and did the 6 weeks thing. So, and then we get the 7 years and now we got to do the process to get to the dual citizenship. So by the time it's done, we've been together for 8 years, right? So we get toxic vibes or like hard-headed or this person's going to be rough to deal with. We just don't do it. There are plenty of firms out there that'll just take your money, get you a permit, and drop you in the street, never talk to you again. We don't do that. We stick with you until you're fully integrated and until you get to dual citizenship. So we look at our clients a little bit differently. It's not just a paycheck. We got to be able to click with you and have a good relationship with you for the next 7 to 8 years until we get you to the promised land here. And then you're ready to rock. You're integrated completely. All restrictions are lifted from you as far as like working papers and all that. Now you're a full-on citizen. You have both passports. You can do whatever you want, right? So that's where we carry our clients to. So we always want to make sure that it's a really good client fit. And if it's not, then we're not shy about just saying, hey, look, we think maybe another firm is a better fit for you. And sometimes you guys can like feel that before even calling us. So I always like to make sure that you have another option on which that other option is going to be the embassy, because your business is nothing compared to the business that the embassy gives those attorneys. And they know that if they screw you over, you're going to go right back to the same embassy and tell them, hey, that guy on the list that you gave me completely screwed me over, and they're going to lose big bucks from the embassy, because that's the only way you get on the embassy list is if the embassy have done business with you. So they're not going to jeopardize U.S. embassy business to screw you over. So those are like the two options that I can give you right here. You mentioned if there's a monthly retainer fee for this. No, there isn't. No, absolutely not. So, and that you can, right? There are people who do that with us because they do turnkey with us. So it's not really a retainer fee, but there are people who will get an investor permit and they'll actually never come here, right? I know it sounds crazy, but there are people who will get an investor package from us. And what will end up happening is we'll create their business here. Sometimes we'll create them a trust fund if they need one or they want one, but we'll definitely create them a business. We'll buy land in the name of that business, right? We'll build a house or Airbnb or warehouse or whatever it is they're doing, again, in the name of that business that they're in control of. They get a bank account, they own the business, and then we'll set up everything. We'll do all their hiring for them. We'll get a team in place that will actually manage that business for them. And so they don't have to do anything, right? And so these are people who have a lot of time, or who have no time, have no time but a lot of money, right? So typically people like dental hygienists, they make a crap ton of money. I was surprised. The first client that came in that was a dental hygienist. FNMPs, right, which is a family nurse practitioner. There's something called a nurse D. There are people who have doctorate degrees in nursing, right? They make a ton of money, but they work their butt off for that money. These are people who work 80 hours in 1 week, right? In order to make that big money that they make. Truck drivers, we get a lot of truck drivers that make really good money, but they're over the road truck drivers and like they have no time. So they got a bunch of money, but they ain't got no time, but they understand that their money sitting in the bank means they're actually losing money because inflation is eating the money that's in the bank, right? So their buying power is going down every year because their money's not working for them. So they'll come to us and they'll do like an Airbnb at the beach and they'll set it all up. They'll pay everything and we'll manage it for them. And then we'll have a management fee, which is typically a percentage. So if we can't make good money for you, then we don't get paid good money. And we'll go from there. So those people are kind of paying us over the course of the 7 years. But outside of that, we don't do like retainers or anything like that. So what ended up happening is you come in, you get your immigration package, whatever it is. If you're going to be here for the 7 years, typically we're building you a house because why wouldn't we? Right. And so we're probably building you a house. And then if let's say you're doing a residency, right? Because the 7 years is for dual citizenship. So you're here on a residency permit. We'll get you a 3-year, which is a maximum residency permit. So you'll have a 3-year residency permit. You'll have whatever perks are included in your tier of service. And then in 2.5 years, we'll be like, hey, 3 years is coming up. This is what it's going to take to renew. This is what it costs. This is what all the new fees are, whatever the case might be with the government, because the government changes prices every so often. Then we'll renew you, right? So you had 3 years, you just got 3 more. That's 6 already. All we did was renew you one time, and we're up to 6 years, right? So then at the end of those 6 years, right, 5.5 years, we'll say, hey, in 6 months, you got to renew. We'll renew you one more time, right? And then at that point, we'll request a 1-year renewal on the basis of we're going to apply for your citizenship at the 7-year mark, right? And so we'll get that 1-year renewal. And at the 6-month mark, you're allowed to start the application for the dual citizenship. So the same thing that we have been doing before, we'll do again. Hey, it's 6 months. Now, these are all the things we're going to need to apply for dual citizenship. And we'll bother you like in the 7 years, right? Because we'll be like, hey, listen, this is how you need to file your taxes. Even though you have no taxable liability, you still need to make a filing, because we're going to take those filings, and that's part of the case for your dual citizenship, right? This is how we're setting up your tax account. We're setting it up a special way so that it shows a certain thing when they do the background check for your dual citizenship that's favorable to you getting your dual citizenship. So we do all these little things over the course of the 7 years with the law firm, so that when we get to the end of the 7 years, you're dang near guaranteed dual citizenship. We've never had anyone denied, right? It can happen, so I can't guarantee it 100%. It can happen that they can deny you, but it's just never happened for us. We've been doing this for 13 years, right? So as long, as you got a good team working with you, because you can have the permits, like you can be like, oh, well, I know, what I'm doing, and maybe I paid a lawyer and got the first permit, but I think I should be able to renew, and it should work out from now on, just me doing it by myself. The problem is you don't know all those little steps to do in between to guarantee that you get the dual citizenship. So we've had clients come back to us, 7 years later, after they left us after getting the first permit and figured they could do it on their own. And then they get to the end and they get denied. And then, they're scrambling back to us because they're trying to figure out how to maintain the chain, because it has to be an unbroken chain of having the permits in order for you to even be eligible for the dual citizenship. And then by the time, they get back to us, it's already too late. They've already broken the chain, and their 7 years starts over again. So you want to do it right the first time for sure. Whether it's our firm or not, you want a professional to hold your hand through until you get the dual citizenship. And that's in every country, right? I used to do this before Kenya. I used to do it in Hong Kong. Hong Kong was just a little bit different. You needed to own property for 3 years, but we used to do something similar in Hong Kong. And it was the same thing, man. Like people, they'd start good with the professional and then they, try to save a penny and cost themselves $100, So definitely if you're trying to build your passport portfolio and you want multiple passports from multiple countries, you want to make sure that a professional sees you through from the beginning until the time you get the passport. You want to wing it after you're a citizen and you have rights, because until then you don't have rights. It's all privileges, right? So, once you get the rights, fine, you can wing it. But until all your restrictions are removed and you're a citizen, just have somebody hold your hand. Hopefully that answered your question, and hopefully that makes sense. All right, guys. Is there any other questions about any of this? I tried to jump on and do a short Q&A. That's what I said when I started this, right? This is going to be a short Q&A. We've been online for 1 hour and 4 minutes. So any other questions about permits, immigrating over here, building estates, any of that stuff? I'm here for it. even if it's one of the things that we do that was not the subject matter of this particular live, and you've been holding a question for me, go ahead. If you got a trust fund question or anything like that, or a business question, I'm here for it. Go ahead and shoot your questions to me. If there are no questions, then I'll call it. Edgar from YouTube. I don't understand. Read what you wrote and then ask the question again. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I got you. So the question for the TikTok folks who can't see what he wrote, he's basically asking, well, why offshore trusts instead of domestic trusts? The reason is protection. A domestic judge can set aside a domestic trust. The offshore trust is there to protect you in case something goes wrong and you lose, right? So, and it can be something as simple as like you got into a car accident, it was your fault, right? You weren't looking, you missed the stop sign, you ran the stop sign, and you hit a car, and God forbid somebody loses their life, right? Sucks, but that doesn't mean that your kids should be ruined because you had a traffic accident and somebody lost their life, right? So they sue you, they win. It was your fault, right? Your car insurance pays as much as your policy allows it to pay, but then that's it. And they won more than that policy allows it to pay. So then they start going after your personal assets. They want to sell things. They want to get rid of stuff. All your stuff over here, all your international stuff is 100% safe because you don't own it. The trust owns it. And even if the judge tries to set aside the trust, which some, judges do, actually, it happens routinely in the United States. They'll try to set aside the trust and say, all right, well, I don't care about that trust. I want you to go get that stuff out of the trust and give it to these people here. The offshore trustee will say no, right? And so what that typically looks like is there's a clause in the trust that anytime there's a distribution requested from the trust, the trustee has to swear in the related party asking for the distribution, right? Because you're not the beneficiary, right? It's typically your kids or your grandkids that are the beneficiary. And even if you are, it wouldn't even matter. Even as beneficiary, you could request a distribution and they would swear you in. And when they swear you in under penalty of perjury, they would ask you if you're doing this because of a court order. No court can order you to perjure yourself. So you would have to say, yes, I am doing this, because a judge ordered me to do it. And then that clause in the trust deed would say that the trustee has, they have no choice but to say no to any request that comes after that, right? So if a judge ordered you to go and get this stuff out of the trust and pay the person who won the lawsuit with the stuff that's in the trust that's supposed to be for your kids, when you would go to the trust corporation that's acting as your trustee, and you would ask for it, and the corporation would swear you in under penalty of perjury and ask you what's going on. Has a judge ordered you to do this? And as soon as you say yes to that, the trustee would just say, nope, I'm not giving you anything because I own it. The trust owns it, not you. It's not yours. So you can ask, but my answer is no. And then you've complied with the court order, but they haven't been able to take your stuff, right? And so that's the difference between offshore and domestic. In a domestic trust, the judge could literally just set aside the trust. Like the judge could say, this trust doesn't exist anymore. And that's the end of it, right? They can set aside that trust, reach in there, take whatever they want and give it to whoever they want, right? Same thing with like prenums, right? Prenums get set aside all the time, or ruled unenforceable or whatever, right? So a lot of our clients that have the offshore trust, they don't even do prenums anymore because it doesn't matter. They don't own, anything. And if their trust gets deep enough, then what typically happens is that trust owns a company. The company is typically profitable. Their kids get a salary from the company, and typically that salary is minimum wage, right? But the house that the kids live in is owned by the trust, and the kids pay rent. Um, and the car they drive is owned by like a company that's owned by the trust, right? And they pay for that as well. So we've actually had clients where the kids got married, the spouse really liked the lifestyle. Unfortunately, the last time this happened, there were kids involved. So married and then made kids like within a year of the marriage and all of that, and then tried to leave and take half, and found out the hard way there was no marital property. So they were like, all right, well, screw it, I'm going to get child support. And found out again the hard way that for the last 5 years, these kids have been making minimum wage. So it wasn't like they started making minimum wage like when you got married to them. That's a big thing, right? There's something called seasoning. You can't do trust as a reaction, all right? Or else it is what they call a sham trust, and they can dissolve it, right? But if your trust has always existed or has existed for more than 2 years before anything happens, then that trust is locked in stone, and there ain't nothing they can do about it. So in that particular case, that particular partner who was filing for the divorce ended up actually giving them the child. They just gave him the kid because I want to say that the child support was $11 a month or something like that, because he'd been making minimum wage from the company that was owned by the trust his entire adult life. So that had been like, they went back and they searched all the records. And even though he drove a Range Rover, the Range Rover was owned by a company. It was a company car. You know what I mean? It had nothing. It wasn't his personal car. The house was a company house, and he paid rent. You know what I mean? So it wasn't marital house. So he couldn't take half of the house. They couldn't take half of nothing. There was just nothing for them to take because the trust owned everything, sometimes through other companies, but the trust owned everything and took care of the kids. So, it just didn't work. Are the divorce laws, child support, and alimony there in Kenya similar to the States? No, they're not. And obviously, if you're here, then a Kenyan trust is not offshore, right? That's why we also deal with Seychelles and Mauritius. But here, what is it? It's qualified, right? So there's no automatic 50% here. But there are formulas to figure out like what people get here, but it doesn't really matter because the divorce rate's 2% here. So like people get married, they don't get divorced here. So the government doesn't incentivize divorce here. So the countries with the highest divorce rates, the government incentivizes divorce. So there's like a monetary kind of reward for getting divorced in those countries. And then the countries with the lowest divorce rates, it's not incentivized. So it doesn't happen like that. But yeah, here I'm almost certain, I'm sure you can Google it, but I'm almost certain that the divorce rate here is like 2 or 3%. It's something really, really low. I know that I know kids are part of the equation though. Like if you're getting divorced and you've had children, like there's a way that they weigh it. So they're like, all right, you had kids, you did this, you like not going to school, like you didn't go to school so you can start the family. If you would have went to school, then you would be here. Like they do like a calculation. And so you can end up with more than 50%, but it's just not automatic. It's not just like automatic 50% after like 1 year. Like if you try to leave in a year, yeah, ain't no way you're getting 50%. There's a whole formula of like how long were you married? What did you do? What did you do? Da, 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 and then they divide assets that way. But yeah, so hopefully that answered everything for you. Yes, anytime, bro. Yeah, that's fine. Seychelles and Mauritius. We do Seychelles and Mauritius. We typically do asset protection trusts out of there. So you got to have some assets to even get into that. We only put people in Mauritius if they have more than $1 million in assets. And there are special laws over there that make that make sense. And it's expensive to even set up a trust over there. So like that also makes it make sense. Seychelles will do obviously under $1 million. But again, we typically do that. The trusts in Seychelles for asset protection. Generational wealth trusts we do out of Kenya because your generational wealth trust is amazing. It's tax exempt. The distributions are tax exempt up to 10 million shillings per year per beneficiary. So that's a beautiful thing. Things being settled into the trust are tax exempt. So it's a really solid way to build generational wealth. And so we do all of our generational wealth trusts typically out of Kenya. But asset protection trusts, some will do in Kenya, some will do in the Seychelles, some will do in Mauritius. And then depending on the tier of service that the client needs and how many assets they have and where those assets are located, we might use a different region. It's rare, but like we'll use Singapore sometime if they're doing a bunch of business in Asia. We sometimes use Hong Kong if their assets are heavy on the IP side. It's like intellectual property assets. We'll do Hong Kong for those things. If it's a bunch of like active European companies, sometimes we'll do the Isle of Man, which is in England. But those are rare circumstances. We've done Isle of Man twice in the 13 years. We've done Singapore about 5 or 6 times, and Hong Kong once. So typically we do Seychelles and Mauritius. I didn't even speak about trust that much here, Ed. So you must have been following me for a while here. But yeah, there's just different things that different. Now, there's one jurisdiction that will actually allow you to do the sham trust thing. So there's one jurisdiction that will allow you to like react. So like it'll allow you to like make a trust like during a divorce and like hide your asset. That's a big mess though. It's really expensive, right? Because they know it's going to be a fight, right? Because the trust isn't legitimate by any international standard. So the law firms there, they charge an arm and a leg. The government is set up for it. So the government's not going to cooperate with the U.S. government when they try to break that trust up. But the U.S. Judges are going to be looking to lock you up for it. So it's a whole strategy thing. We don't get involved in that at all, just because it's nonsense, in our opinion. So we don't take on any of those clients. But there is one jurisdiction that doesn't have seasoning. We don't advertise it, so we never actually say which jurisdiction it is, but a Google search will let you know. Is that it? Is that all your trust questions? If you guys got any trust questions on TikTok, feel free. Ed got all the trust questions here on YouTube. Yeah, okay. IBC, okay. So an IBC is an international business corporation or company, depending on which country it's coming out of. Sometimes what needs to be offshore is the company, right? Not the trust. And it just depends on what we're doing, right? But the IBC is a special corporate formation, kind of like, a corp versus an LLC type of thing in the United States, right? But IBCs typically have a restriction where you can't actually do business in the country where they're registered, right? So it's an international business company or corporation, depending on, some places use GBC. So like Mauritius uses GBC, which is a global business company. And then Seychelles uses IBC, which for them is an international business company, right? But they both have that restriction where you can't do business in the country because they're tax exempt. So if you do business in the country, you now have to start paying taxes, and it changes the it's almost like going from like a C corp to an S corp, right? So it changes the way that the corporation is looked at, and then you can't get back to IBC again. Now you just have a regular corporation paying the corporate tax rate. Mauritius, the IBC or the GBC rate, I think it's 1.6%. It's definitely less than 2%. So it's still good, but the Seychelles rate is 0%. So it's amazing, right? And so there are things you can do, right? So like, for example, we have a client that has a hotel, a beach hotel. The local tax rate, the corporate tax rate, where the beach is 30%, right? But his international hotel guests that book through his booking company, which is a Seychelles IBC, pays 0%, right? So that company, that's the booking company, is paying 0% because it's in the Seychelles. And the only bookings that have to pay the 30% are local bookings, right? So local people from that same country, those bookings have to pay the 30%. So he saves 30% on 75% of his guests, right? So there are strategies that can utilize the IBC. That's just one. That's like probably the least technical example. There are some like super technical things you can do that really set you up pretty from a generational wealth standpoint. But those are trade secrets, Ed. Book a consultation. Let's see. If I didn't answer you on TikTok, it's because however you asked your question, you used a bad word and TikTok has filtered it. And so I never saw it. Even though you can see it, I have not seen it. I didn't realize that happened until someone pointed it out to me. So if you ask a question on TikTok and it seems like I'm ignoring you, that's what happened. You guys on YouTube, I don't think that's possible on YouTube. I think all of your stuff comes through. No problem, Ed. Yeah, my link is in the bio. We did just update our website, but if you have the old website, it's just going to say on the front page, here's the new website. Journey Back to Eden. Journey Back to Eden is not mine. Journey Back to Eden is one of our partners, Traverse Culture. I am an ambassador for the Journey Back to Eden, and I will be speaking at the conference. But it's not our program. But definitely, if you go to diasporaltd.com, our original website, there is a link to be able to sign up for the Journey Back to Eden. It'll be at the end of this year. $199, I think, is all it takes to hold the spot, which is fabulous. And then you can get in there and see what the prices are for dual occupancy and or double occupancy and single occupancy and all of that, and tickets, for the conference and all of that. But it's going to be pretty cool. It's I think it's 200. It's going to be 200 like business people and like-minded individuals flying in for the conference, and it's going to be a week of just fun stuff. Going to the safari, going to do crazy fun stuff. So that'll be there. If one has an investor permit, yet wants dual citizenship, do we apply for the residence permit? Yes, but the best way to do that, because the investor permit allows you to work in Kenya, right? So the best situation for that is if the person with the investor permit is single. If the person with the investor permit is single, then their best option is to see if they find love or not and get married. And then they can maintain the investor permit for 7 years and then apply on the basis of marriage, right? Because if you have the investor permit and you convert to residency, you're no longer allowed to work, right? That's one of the stipulations on the residency permit. And you're working through whatever investment you've made with the investor permit, right? So if you work on the residence permit, then when they do the background check for the dual, so you might get away with it for the 7 years. Like you might have your company and all of that, you're making millions and life is great. And then when you apply for the dual citizenship, they'll say you violated your residency permit, dual citizenship denied. And they might kick you out of the country, right? Because you violated your permit, right? So at that point, they'll make a determination as to whether or not they feel like, all right, well, you violated your permit, so your permit is rescinded, and now that your permit is rescinded, you don't have any legal status in this country anymore, so you're deported, and so that's where people like mess themselves up. So you got to figure out which one you want, and go with it. But the second route to dual citizenship, the direct route is marriage. The first route is residency, right? Now, there is a chance that depending on like what your investor permit did, right? So like, let's say you opened up, I don't know, a textile factory, and it got big and you employed 10,000 Kenyans for 5 of the 7 years that you had the investor permit. You can make a case, right? So like our lawyers would go in there and be like, look, yes, she had an investor permit. Yes, she didn't have a residency permit, but the value she's given Kenya is enough that you should consider rewarding her with citizenship, right? But that's something that you need a legal team to be able to do. And you need to be able to show the proof in a proper way, verifiable to their systems, which is one of the things that our law firm does, is they make sure that, at least once a year, typically it's twice a year, they do things that actually that get like flagged as proof. They don't get like red flag, they get green flagged, right? Because they understand the system from the inside. So they do things that actually hit the government system that say, yeah, this person is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So by the time it comes, for you to apply for dual citizenship, they open up your file and it's 7 years of green flags, right? And it looks like someone has investigated you every year for 7 years and you pass the investigation with flying colors. That's what it looks like in the system, right? So then they just like, yep, no problem. This person should absolutely be a citizen, and it's a done deal. But you just want to make sure that you got like some solid professional guidance if you're trying to make that happen off of an investor permit. And typically you might have to sacrifice some profit, you know what I mean? Because if you're going to do it off an investor permit, you really got to show that you made a significant impact to society. And so showing that you maximize your profits and didn't maximize your impact wouldn't be conducive to that outcome. And so the only other way is to do it through marriage and just be like, well, regardless of my impact, this is my husband and he's a Kenyan and we've been married for 7 years. You know what I mean? And then, you'd be able to do that and be fine. So that's that. But the investor permit is really solid if you're doing like legit business there. If you're doing legit business, it's the only way to legally do it. So anything else, and you're essentially breaking the law at that point. I wouldn't recommend that at all. So that's how you would do it. Either do like really, really good work, really, really good for the community, or get married. Or close down your business or run your business from America and not bring it to Kenya and switch to residence. But just so you know, when you make the switch, you lose the time. So if you have an investor permit and you're like in your first year of it, that's probably the best time to do that, because then you only lose a year. But if you had the residency permit, for 5 years, you're not going to switch to the investor permit for 5 years. You're not going to switch to a residency and get those 5 years. You'll be starting over again at 1. Which may not matter, because if you're getting married, you're starting at 1 anyway, right? But it just depends on like how you're approaching it. We definitely have people who like did investor permits. Business doesn't always work. In fact, most of the time it doesn't work. All business owners know that. So we've definitely had people who had investor permits and the business like failed and then they didn't want to do it again, but they did want to be here and then they did switch to a residency permit. So that happens. No, Sarah. So yes and no. So what you're saying is wrong because you're talking about the business. You can switch from the investor permit to the digital nomad and run a company. The difference is the investor permit, you're running a company in Kenya and you're hiring Kenyans and you have a physical location in Kenya. And the real kind of crux of the definition is the money is moving inside of Kenya, right? So that's what the investor permit is for. If you're doing it on a digital nomad permit, then the company is not in Kenya and has no Kenya clients, right? Which is what I was just saying to her. If it's a business you can do from America, then you don't even have to bring your company here at all, right? So like I have companies that are here, but like this firm is American and I left it American because it's accountable to US law, because there were so many scams happening in this space that by keeping my company accountable to US law, it gave me an edge in the market, right? So I got a lot of clients that came to me simply because they could sue me. Right? Whereas if you give your money to somebody on the ground here and they take it and run, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can make the filings, but good luck finding them, right? But for me, like my bank accounts can be frozen, like all of that stuff can happen because the company is, this particular company anyway, is still in Pennsylvania, right? So I've left it there for that reason. But if it's something like this that you can operate, from the United States, then yes, you can do the digital nomad, and it's probably preferable to the investor permit just on a cost basis. Yes, exactly. So like an Airbnb, you couldn't do. Like if your business was Airbnb, you would need the investor permit because the money is changing hands here. Right. Right. Yep. You got it. Yep. All right. Let's see. All right. Any other questions on YouTube or TikTok? All right, guys. It is 1 a.m. here in Deanny Beach, 1:08 to be exact. So if there are no more questions, if there are, go ahead and ask them. I am here, so you might as well. But if there are no more questions on YouTube or TikTok, then I will wrap this session up. Hope you guys got what you came for. Yes, yeah, no. So we actually have a property tier in the digital nomad. So yeah, as a digital nomad, you can still purchase property. What are the tiers? You must have just got here. All right, so there's your standard tier that just gives you the access, right? We always do a little bit more than just access, though. So with that standard Nomad access, it's $5,500. You get the permit, of course. There's a requirement in the permit that you have to do a lease. So our lawyers will draft the lease. They'll negotiate on your behalf and all that. That's included. You also have to get a no contest letter from your embassy, whichever embassy you come from. So we handle that. Our lawyers go to the embassy, take care of that. We, of course, take care of your immigration. We take care of your tax file. We'll help you set up a bank account locally, and we'll help you set up a digital currency account. So that's like your basic digital nomad situation. Now we have an ultra, where the ultra will actually get you your apartment, right? So we'll make sure it's up to standard and all of that stuff. Typically, right now we're limited in the places where we do it because it's a brand new permit, right? There's only been about 6 of these permits issued so far, and our firm has done 4 of them. So it's brand new. We don't have places all over Kenya just yet, but right now we have a bunch of places by the beach, and so that's between 25,000 and 35,000, depending on where you want to live, and it covers everything that you would have got in the access that I just said. But it's also 1 year of rent paid, so you don't have to pay your rent for a year. Your utilities and your internet are included. 1 year of maid service is included. We buy your cell phone plan and starter pack and all of that. We set you up with a delivery service that can deliver anything directly to you. So it's like a concierge delivery service. You just call them, they'll go pick up whatever it is that you need and bring it to you. And then you pay them for the trip, and which is less than $1 per trip. So pretty cool service. So that's our ultra service. I see your question, Nini. And then we have the legacy service. And the legacy service is we do everything that the other 2 services do, except we actually buy you a piece of land in your name out here. We set up either a trust fund or a company for you, or both in some circumstances. We then sit you down with our architect. The law firm has a contractor division that has its own architects. So we'll sit you down with an architect and design a house. And then when you leave as a digital nomad, the house will keep performing. It's your house. You own the title deed, all that's in, it's in your company's name or your name, whichever. And then when you go wherever you go next, if you nomad to Bali, or if you go back home, the Airbnb keeps sending you checks. So for people who are legacy focused, that option is there for them. So those are the 3 tiers. And then Nini, you asked, how do you get citizenship in Kenya? You hold a residency permit for 7 years, and then you can apply for it. Now, our law firm does a bunch of little things every year while you're holding that permit to make it more likely that you'll get it. And we have a 100% success rate so far. But that's what it is. You hold a residency permit for 7 years, or you are married to a Kenyan for 7 years, right? So those are the 2 direct paths to citizenship. All right. So Susan, you got the tiers. You got, how much is the legacy tier? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. Legacy tier is, it starts at 170. I know typically when people say it starts at, that means that the thing costs way more, but that's not what it is. If you want a bigger house, right? So there are a couple of preset like building plans, right? They're both 2-story houses. One just has a gigantic like walk-in shower and walk-in bedroom and all that. Hey, Jay Rivera. And the other one has a kid's bedroom and like mom and dad's bedroom, or mom's bedroom or dad's bedroom, or whatever. Both have offices because it's digital nomad. And both come with a standard 50 by 100 plot, which is 1/8 of an acre, right? But you could say to us, I want a 5-bedroom house. Well, obviously we can't build you a 5-bedroom house for the same price as a 2-bedroom house or whatever. So that's why it says starts at 170. Everybody who's gotten that tier so far, which is actually most of our clients actually have taken that tier, they've all just taken the 170. They all like the designs that the architect has already come up with. But you do have the ability to design something else that has the same square footage. So yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. If you have any other questions for me, go ahead and ask. YouTube has actually asked more questions today than TikTok, which is very rare. Normally it's jumping on TikTok, and YouTube is silent. Thanks, Jay Rivera. I really appreciate that. Thank you, brother. All right. Any other questions for me on anything that my company does? It's 1:15 a.m. Enrique, where I am. Where are you? Are you on the East Coast? Are you in America at all? You're in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Wow, wow. I grew up not too far from there. All right. No questions on TikTok. Nothing on YouTube. All right. Well, since it is almost 1:30 a.m. for me, if I don't see any more questions, I'm going to wait for 2 minutes. I know some people are like, they fiddle with their thumbs. So I'll wait until it's 1:18 a.m. here. And if I don't see a new question, then we'll call it. And in the meantime, thank you guys for hanging out, spending some time. So, is Kenya the only place you're lawful? Yes. So it took us over a decade, Dini, to get all the pieces of the puzzle together, right? And so we can duplicate this in, in the countries that are nearby, but the issue becomes like, I'll give you a really good example. Our head of immigration law, right? So in my law firm, I have different divisions, and there's a head of each division, right? So there's a head of real estate law, there's a head of trust law, there's a head of estate law, there's a head of immigration law. All the law that we do, there's a lawyer that runs a team. So the lawyer that runs the team for our immigration side went to school with the highest government official in the government for immigration. So like when something goes wrong, she like calls him. She's like, one of your employees messed up this application. Like, we don't know what's going on. They're trying to like, reject it, and we didn't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? And her friend from law school, who runs that entire department in the government, looks into it. And as long as we didn't do anything wrong, he won't like, he's actually a pretty stand-up guy. He won't like cheat for us. But as long as, what we're saying is right, which we're not going to lie to him and burn that bridge, right? So anytime we say it, it's real, he'll just fix it for us, right? So there's plenty of law firms, but they don't get the same traction we get because I specifically hired the best people in the best fields that have the best connections, so that we can get things done. So like we get a permit out in like 6 weeks. It takes other law firms 6 months, sometimes 2 years, right? There'll be people waiting on a permit for years. By the time they get the permit's fully expired. You know what I mean? Crazy stuff happens with these processes if you don't have the right team. So I'd have to do the same thing all over again. I'd have to build all the same relationships. I'd have to figure out how the government works in, I don't know, Ghana or something. I'd have to get the right lawyers in place, and then they'd have to be willing to work for me, because typically the right lawyers already have their own firms, right? So you got to buy all the firms and merge them all together. And so it's not a simple thing to get set up in the way that we're set up, where we can just snap our fingers and make things happen. And it took 10 years to do. So while, yes, we could probably expand to other countries, it's not a quick process. And I just haven't had the heart to do it, quite frankly. So we do Kenya. Now, our clients who are already our clients, we can represent them in other African countries. There's a legal concept called know your client, right? It's used in banking and it's used in law. And once we can pass the know your client threshold, like we set up a pharmaceutical company in Sierra Leone for a client, right? We set up a coffee production facility in Uganda for a client, right? Somebody was asking us to do something in Ghana, and I can't remember what it was because they ended up backing out of the deal on their end. So then we ended up not having to do it. But we were going to do that thing for them in Ghana, right? So all of what we would call a bar association, typically in Africa, they're called law societies. So there's the LSK, the Law Society of Kenya. All of those societies are connected. And so we can move through those law societies and do work anywhere as long as we meet the know your client burdens. So for new clients onboarding, we can't do it, or it's so ridiculous that we choose not to do it, I guess I should say. But if you're already a client, then we can take care of you anywhere. We actually just set up a client in Mexico. There's another client that's looking to get another piece of trust property in the Dominican Republic. We've set up clients in China, well, Hong Kong. Mainland China is really tough. But Hong Kong, Singapore, of course, the US, we can do anything in the US. So definitely we can help our existing clients anywhere. But as far as building the network we would need to do Ugandan version of what we do, or South African or something like that, we're not game. I am thinking about maybe for people who want to do it and they're in those territories, I can like mentor them through getting to where I am. So like if they're in a position to kind of duplicate what we've done in Kenya, but they do it in Ghana or whatever. But those people got to be serious. Like they have to have the runway to do it. It can't be like, well, I don't have any money, but I want to dream about doing it and call you 5 days a week to dream with you on the phone. I don't have time for that. But if somebody, has a legitimate, business and they're looking to move into this, but they're doing it in a different one of the 54 states here in Africa, then I'd probably be open to kind of mentoring them and giving them a look behind the curtain and helping them get that set up on their own. And then of course we would refer to them, and hopefully they would refer to us, but I'm cool with that. But yeah, definitely not building another one anytime soon. All right, nothing from YouTube. Looks like we're done on TikTok. Anything else? Any last questions? I think we are good. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you guys learned everything that you needed to know and wanted to know about the Digital Nomad Permit. If you want to get in touch with us, the link is in the bio. You can fill out our assessment. When you go to our new website, you'll see an assessment right on the front page. There's an assessment for people who want to immigrate to Kenya, and there's also an assessment for people who are looking at doing generational wealth and trusts. You guys can take those assessments and a lawyer will get back to you within 48 hours. And you can set up a discovery call. Discovery calls are just to figure out whether we can help you. We will not solve any of your problems on a discovery call, but we will be honest about whether or not we're even the right fit for you. If we're not and we know who is, we'll make that referral. If we're not and we don't know who it is, we'll typically refer you to your own embassy in the target country that you want to deal with, because they do have a list of legal professionals there that they can give you. If we are, then we'll let you know that we are, and then you can actually book a legitimate consultation with us, and then we'll get into actual solutions in that consultation. So that is how we do business. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. If you remember a question after this live is over, you can definitely comment on any post. And if it's a specific comment, I will typically do a video reply and go ahead and answer your question. So great talking to you all. Jay Rivera, really cool seeing you, man. Good to see you out there. And so, yeah, if you need anything else from us, you know where to find us. We are at Diaspora Freedom on virtually everything. And we go live typically around noon Eastern Standard Time, Saturday and Sunday, and then sporadically through the week, whenever I have time. I'm normally pretty busy, but whenever I have time, we'll go live. We are finishing off one legacy property right now. We're actually moving furniture into it tomorrow for that client. So look forward to seeing some of those videos happen. And then we're building we're building an investment duplex right now. And we're building floor 1 of the duplex, and it's going to be really messy if they don't do floor 2 because we're putting in a pool. So we're trying to that pool is going to get wrecked if we don't do floor 2 first, but that'll be a story for a story time. So keep your eye on the channels, and you'll find out more about the clients I'm dealing with, and how that works, and which ones make really weird decisions and how that impacts them and how it might impact their ROI. So keep an eye on the channel, and you'll see what happens, and maybe be able to avoid some mistakes even, and go from there. But yeah, that is it for me. It is 1:30 a.m. I'm delirious. You guys have a great day, and it was really cool having you here. And we'll see you again, at the very least, Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. See you guys.